Hello, I'm Jim Kerr and welcome to Passion Highway. On this episode, we're going to talk about winterizing our coaches. Unfortunately, it's that time of the year, so I'm going to take you through this big guy behind me and show you how we winterize our rig. And if we can winterize this big guy that has 2 full bathrooms, a washer, and a very complicated plumbing system, you can certainly winterize your rig yourself. So let's get started, shall we? Well, the first step in the process is making sure that you have all of the right tools. You don't want to start a project like winterization and not having everything on hand that you need. So let's kind of walk through the tools that you need. I'm also going to put these in a link below in the description so you can find them mostly directly on Amazon. We also wrote a blog article on this that goes step by step with detailed pictures, and that's going to be linked below. But you can also reach our blog article at passionhighway.com/winterization. All right, so the first thing we need, of course, is antifreeze. I found this at Lowe's. It's real cheap. You just want to make sure that you find something that's rated for RV and marine antifreeze and that it's free of any sort of chemicals, so it's safe to drink in case it accidentally gets ingested. And you want to also look at the temperature rating of the antifreeze and make sure it can get down well below what you expect your winter temperatures to be. In this case, this one will go down to -50, which is well below what we get up here in the Chicago area. Another piece of this is finding a tank. I found this online on Amazon, and it's a perfect size tank to fit in our rig. It's easier to draw the chemical out of a larger tank. This is a 5-gallon tank versus having to keep changing these bottles and running dry. So all I do is pour some of the antifreeze into the bottle, and then the bottle's what I use to actually siphon the antifreeze in. It's just a lot easier to watch. And then at the end of the year, if we don't use all of the antifreeze, we can just seal it right back up, and it's perfectly fine and will stay clean until next year. So while we're talking about antifreeze, we need to have a hose. And this hose connects into our system so we can siphon the antifreeze in the winterization mode. So I just bought this cheap hose on Amazon, and it's just a little short garden hose. And what I did was I cut the end off because I don't really need this as a garden hose, and it makes siphoning a little bit easier. So this cut off end goes into the tank, and then this other end here goes into the rig. And you might also notice that I have one of these quick disconnects. I put those on everything. It just makes it a lot easier to connect and disconnect from our camper. So it might be a little bit strange to think about it, but you also need to have an air compressor on hand. So kind of the first step before you put the glycol in is to make sure that the camper is free of as much water as possible. So using a Viair like this makes life a lot easier. You can compress the air and blow it through your lines. But to do that, you got to be quite careful. You actually need to make sure that you have a regulator valve. And this valve here is actually a Viair product, and it comes with this little connector, which actually opens and closes the air. It makes it really easy to start and stop it because you're not always wanting air flowing in. And then on this end, we have just a regular connector that connects up to our rig. So that's this quick disconnect again. And on the other end, the most important part is it has this regulator. And this regulator is really important because it lets us step down the air coming from the Viair to make sure that we don't get too much pressure in the lines. So the next thing we have to think about when we're talking about winterization and tools is the hot water tank. So you need to have a 1/2-inch drive wrench. You want to have a nice beefy one because these drain plugs can be pretty hard to get out. They're the anode rod, and you have to take that out to drain the tank. And to To drain it on ours, we need a 1 1/16 inch socket. So this is kind of a big socket, not something that you would normally have. Make sure that you get the right socket for your system. I have this little extension that I have put on it because it helps get away from the camper when we're taking this off. Sometimes it takes quite a bit of torque. They can be corroded a little bit on. So you need a good socket with an extension and a wrench, a socket wrench, to make sure that you can get enough pressure to remove that valve. Well, after you've drained the tank, it's always a good idea to flush it. And I like having one of these rods, and all it is a big long rod. On this end, water comes out. And down here on this end, you just connect it up to a hose. So like all my other stuff, I have these little quick disconnect fittings. So I just connect this up to a hose and open up this valve, and it lets water run in, and you can kind of clean the debris out of the tank. So you can take it a little further and actually fully clean the tank with vinegar in that. I'll do a whole video on that to share with you guys, but for winterization, I mostly just want to make sure to clean all the debris out. Another nice thing to have is these little caps. So I have one of these caps that I put in the hot water tank after we've cleaned it out. This just kind of keeps critters from getting inside. I don't like putting the anode rod back in. I like keeping it out and away from the tank, so it's a good reminder that it's been cleaned. And this guy I just screw in. I'll put a link to this to Amazon because these are a little bit hard to find. It's kind of an unusual size. All right, and then the last tool that I have is not really a tool. So we have a water system, like a shower type of hose in our rig that we use to, spray down the porch or whatnot, and it connects into quick disconnect fittings. Well, you have to also clean those fittings. You don't want to have water left in those lines because it could freeze. So all I did was I just took the end off that hose. I didn't really want to run antifreeze through the entire length of hose, so I just wanted to make it short. Then I use some adapter valves, and then I go into just a normal hose valve with an on and off ball socket there to close the water off. So this lets me just quickly plug into those outside lines, open this up, allow water to pump through. When antifreeze starts coming out, I close it back up and remove it. And that way I can guarantee that the antifreeze has made it all the way into the line. Well, I know I might have said this was the last tool, but there's actually one more. If you have a water filter in your rig, you're going to have a water filter wrench of some sort, something that looks like this. And that's used to remove the water filter out of the rig. So, look this up if you have one, because you'll need this to get this plastic housing off of your centralized water system. You don't want to have any filters in there when you start running antifreeze and flushing out the lines. Now that we have our tools ready, we need to make sure that the rig is ready. I like doing the winterization while we're in a park where we have full-time water and sewage. Kind of sounds counterintuitive, but it's nice to have water so we can flush our tanks, clean things out, pressurize the lines, things like that with water as we need them. So what we generally do is after we've taken our showers and done whatever we need to do with water inside the rig, we turn off the hot water tanks. So we turn off the electric and we turn off the gas, and then we just let the tank cool down. It gets very hot, and when you open it up to drain, all that hot water will come shooting out at you. So it's kind of nice to turn this off ahead of time. But the most important thing is to definitely make sure that your hot water tank is turned off. There's an electric element that goes through the hot water tank, and it's designed to always be inside of water. So if you inadvertently leave the hot water tank, the electric on, as soon as the water drains below that, it'll destroy your tank, and you'll have to buy a new one because it won't be able to heat electrically anymore. So that's a very important step. But also making sure that the gas is off, because you don't want the tank heating up when there's no water in it from gas. And you want to make sure that your water pump is off, because when you start draining water down, the pump might kick on and you don't want it pumping until we're ready for that. So let me show you how we do that on this rig. So this is our monitoring panel, the LCI One control. Yours might look a little bit different, but they all do basically the same thing. So what we want to do to prep the rig is go to Devices, then Monitoring Panel. And what we want to look for is to make sure that all of these things are turned off. So we definitely want the electric water heater turned off because we don't want to burn out that element. We want the gas water heater turned off because we don't want propane gas running and trying to warm up an empty tank. We want our water pump off, and of course our tank heaters. You might also notice that I have most of our tanks are full. The reason that I do this is I build up gray water so we can flush our black tanks and all of our tanks during the winterization process. So I have a video where I talk about how to properly manage and flush gray and black water tanks. I'll put a link description below so you can go directly to that if you want to watch how we do the black and gray water tank flushing. Okay, so now that we're finished inside, let's go outside and take a look at what's going on there. Okay, the first thing we can look at is our hot water tank. That's this guy right here. Most RVs look about like this. Yours might vary a little bit. We have this screen on here to keep bugs out. But all you do is turn that little knob and then it opens right up. Okay, so inside of here we have a pressure relief valve. This is just to let pressure out in case it gets too hot in the tank. We'll be using that in a little bit. We can kind of verify that the tank's not too hot right now. And then right down here, this nut here, and this is a Suburban water heater. It has this nut that is where the anode rod is. So this is how you drain the system. We have to do a little bit of prep work first before we do that, but I wanted to point this out because sometimes it's hard to find. By the way, in the tools section, I mentioned this uses a 1 1/16 inch socket, and sometimes it can be on there pretty tight. So, you know, be prepared to use a little force to take that off if you haven't had it off in a while. Okay, one other thing I want to show you is on these Suburban water heaters, and most water heaters that have an electric element, there's this on and off switch. So what you want to do is to make sure that this switch is turned off. Now what this does is this kills electrical power to this water heater. So if for some reason you forgot to turn the electric off on the inside, by flipping this to off, what that'll do is that'll make sure that the electric power is killed to this. So before draining the tank, you want to flip this switch off. Now in the summer, when you try to restart things and all of a sudden you're not getting electric heat, chances are this switch is turned off. So this is our Nautilus system, and in the Grand Design, most of the Grand Designs, they have a similar system set up like this. And so what we want to do is to get this system ready for winterization. And the easiest way to do that is just to take a look up here, and it shows you Winterize. And so you want to have the blue knob that way, the black knob that way, the red knob that way, and the green knob up. So let's just go ahead and do that real quick. So we turn the white knob down. We go and we turn the blue knob that way. The black knob was already going that way. The green knob stays up, and then the red knob goes this way. Now this red knob, it's not always obvious what these things are doing, but this red knob, what that does is that bypasses fresh water from pouring into the hot water tank. So when this is turned this way, the system will not direct hot or any kind of fresh water into the hot water tank, so you're able to drain it. You could technically leave some of these open, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but when you start draining your hot water tank, you want to make sure this is turned off. All right, so now we're pretty much ready to go. So we've still got our hose connected. So we'll want to go ahead and turn the water off and disconnect the water from the camper itself. Okay, I'm sure you guys all know how this works, but you just turn the knob, obviously, off, and then we need to start disconnecting the hose. Now what I like to do is disconnect the hose from the faucet end and not inside the camper, because this hose line is going to be pressurized with water, and it's easier just to go in and open this up here and release the pressure out of the system, and then it'll drain on the ground versus pouring inside of your water bay. As you can see, it might splash a little bit, but it just lets the water pressure out, and then now it's draining out of the system over here versus pouring into the Nautilus water bay compartment. Okay, now that we've released the pressure out of our hose, we can go ahead and open up this quick disconnect fitting. Might still drip a little bit of water, but at least it's not going to be pressurized. So let's go ahead and see if I can disconnect this guy with one hand. There we go. See, and if you notice, see, it didn't really pour a bunch of water in the system. Then we want to go up here to this one, and I have this 90-degree elbow in there with a little meter to track how much water consumption we've had. So we've used 618.8 gallons this season. So it's nice being in a park. You get to use a lot of water and not have to worry about it. So now we have the system pretty much ready to go. I'll go ahead and pull the hose out of its fitting, but we're not, or out of the entry hole, but we're not quite ready to get rid of the hose yet. We're gonna need some fresh water here in a little bit. So I'll just pull the hose out to the side and we'll come back to it in a little bit. So now we're ready to start draining our hot water tank. So I have this 1 1/16 inch socket and my socket wrench. And then you put it on. Now you kind of have to stand in front of it a little bit to kind of get it moving. But as you start twisting it out, you got to be very careful because it does that. And it'll just pop out and then it'll start draining. So now that we have the water draining, if we open up this pressure relief valve up here, what it'll do, and you definitely want to stand back when you do this, it lets air in the top of the tank, and then it just speeds up the process of draining your tank out. So let's let this guy go for a little bit, and we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Most of the water has drained out of our tank, and I still have this valve open. So now I have connected up this guy. If you remember this tool, the reason we didn't want to put away our fresh water yet is because we want to try to get some of the debris out of the hot water tank. So using this little rod here, all you do is just insert it into the hole, and then you just turn on the water, and then you just kind of slosh it around. So the idea is to just clean the tank out as best as you can. So we want to get all that debris. It settles on the bottom of the tank. So we want to get a nice, good clean. So I'm just kind of working my way around and spraying this guy off and trying to make sure that I have the tank as clean as possible. Now, we will next year clean this out with vinegar, and I'll create a video showing you exactly how to do that. But for the winter, it's always just best just to clean it out, get it ready for storage. If you have time to clean it, you can. But if you don't, you know, at least just making sure that all the debris is out as best as you can is really all you need to do. All right, well, I finished cleaning the tank out, and it's just draining now. And then I also did a wash around the tank, try to clean off some of the debris. I'm going to let this drain for a while. I want to try to get it to where there's no water coming out. But while we're at it, let's just take a look at this anode rod that we pulled out. So what this does is this is a sacrificial corrosion rod, as it were. So what happens is, as corrosion gets built up in the tank, it will attach to this rod first. And you can see kind of down on this end, it's starting to eat it up. But the rest of the rod doesn't look too bad. So theoretically, we could use this another season. This was the entire year, and it doesn't look too bad, but we'll probably change it. Now, again, I don't put this back in. I just lay it on the outside, inside of the compartment, kind of like somewhere like this. So that's a reminder that this water tank has been winterized, in case somebody starts looking at it for some reason. When they see this rod laying out, then they'll know that there must be something going on. So we still have some water coming out, so I'm just going to let this set and we'll move on to the next step. I'm back in our water bay again, so we can go to the next step. You might see this orange hose. What I'm doing is flushing our black tank, so that'll be kind of on and off. Again, I have a video link below that shows how to manage the black tanks if you're interested. So the reason we're back here is that we need to open up the low point drains. Now, Grand Design's really nice in this Nautilus system. They put these right here and they're easy to get to. Sometimes rigs have these buried in different spots, but they'll all kind of look the same. There's going to be this little half twist valve, and then it'll drain the system. So this is the lowest point of water inside of the RV. So what we want to do is open these up, and then you can see kind of down below as I'm opening them, water is draining out. So we'll want to go ahead and let that drain. But to speed up the process a little bit, I'm going to go inside and open up a few sinks, and that'll let air in the line and make this process a little bit faster. Okay, I'm at the bathroom sink, and it'll open hot and cold at the same time. So I just do that, and you can hear the air rushing into the line. And that's telling you that it's evacuating the water out of the system. Okay, we're making some progress here. We can see that we're only to a drip now when it comes to water. So we'll just let this go for a little bit to make sure that the water is mostly out of the system. Now, this does not anywhere near get all the water out of the camper. It just helps drain some of it so you have a little bit less to deal with when you start flushing. Okay, it looks like we're pretty close to just being drip, drip, drip here and there. So the water is mostly out of the system, at least as much as it can drain out of the low point drains. So now we want to go ahead and close these guys back off. And if you have sink valves open on the inside, make sure that all your sinks are closed, and so we can move on to the next step. Now that we've got the low point drains evacuated, for those of you that have onboard water filters, we need to remove the water filter out of the line and dump it out as well. So that's pretty simple. You just go up in with your wrench and then just kind of twist it to get it loose. Then you can take it off, and then you just unscrew it out as carefully as you can, because it'll spill water otherwise when it falls. And then we just take it out, and then let's see if I can get a view of this for you. So that's what it looks like. There's just a filter on the inside, and you pull that filter out and then dump the water. Okay, I figure while I had the filter out, let's just take a look at it and see. So they start off kind of white, and you can see this kind of dark color. This is what's kept debris and whatnot coming in from the park getting into our camper. So it looks like it's doing its job. So we'll dispose of this because we're not going to use this filter anymore. And now we need to put the filter housing back onto the camper. Of course, installing it is just exactly like removing it. We just need to twist it on and just seat it up in. You don't need a tool for this, just kind of hand tight. So the idea is we want this to be no filter in there. So when we're blowing air through first and then eventually antifreeze, that it's not going to be blocked by the filter. Okay, so now on to the next step. Okay, now we get to have some fun. We get to get our air compressor out. So this is our Air, and connect up the air line to it. and then just run it in and connect it up to our batteries. And what's nice about this is that this is a very portable and easy to use system. And we just go in and we take our little pressure regulator valve and we connect it to the air line. And then we turn the pump. Let's see if I can get this adjusted a little bit. And then we turn the pump on. And then what we'll see is that the pressure in the valve is going to come up. And we want to have somewhere around 40 psi. So just crank this up a little bit. That might have been a little bit too much. And then you just push it and lock it in. And what's nice about this is that it's locked, so now we can't accidentally move it. Now if we open up this valve, you'll kind of see what's happening. So I have that pressure a little high. So just backing it off a little bit. And then we just kind of get a general idea. You watch it bump up and then settle in. So I want to kind of take it up. And so that's basically what's going to happen when we connect this to the water system. It's going to pressurize the lines with air, and then we'll be able to push out a lot of the water that's in the lines. A lot of people skip this step. They just go straight to the antifreeze. But by doing this, you're really guaranteeing that you're getting as much of the water out of the system as you possibly can. So let's get started. Okay, so all I did was connect the air to our main water inlet. And again, all of the faucets on the inside are turned off. So then we go and we just slowly open up this valve. And you'll hear it, it's kind of pushing air and pressurizing the system. So we just go ahead and allow that to happen. Got the valve all the way open, and then there you go, you hear it kind of stopping. So what's happening now is that the system is pressurized. It looks like just about 50 psi. So now we can go inside. So for evacuating the water out of the lines, I like starting as far back as I can get and then work my way forward drain by drain. So in this case, I'm in our rear bathroom. So I'll first start off with the sink and then the shower and then the toilet. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Okay, so I'm at the sink. I like doing one side and then the other. So let's go over to the cold side and then just go ahead and open this up slowly. And what you'll see, this water is water that was inside of the system. Now again, all of our water is turned off. So all this water is what's trapped in the line. Whoops. And so you can see now I've made it to the air, but there's still some water in the line. So I just go ahead and allow that to drain a little bit. Try not to make too much of a mess, and turn that off, and then we'll go over to the other side and we'll do the same thing. So we just let it flow, and you can see it's just like regular water. Everything looks fine until I'll try to block this time. So when we get to the point where there's nothing but air in the line, it's going to blast at me again. So let's just let this guy go. And you can see, so I'm on hot. So there we go. As you can see, there's quite substantially a lot of air, or a lot of water that's still in that line. So we want to go ahead and allow that to evacuate. And then I'll move it over to the other side. Just kind of open it gently. And you can see that it's getting there. But there's still water in the line. So the reason we want to do this is that this gets most of the water out and down the drain, but it's not going to get all of it out. We want to get as much as we can, so when we start putting in the antifreeze, we know that we have most of the water out of the lines, and then the antifreeze will fill up those voids, and we're way more likely to not accidentally have some water trapped in there. So now let's go and look at the toilet. Okay, so we do the same thing with the toilet. So we just open this up a little bit. We allow the air to flow through the system. And you can see like all that water that's still coming out. So we just drain that out and just kind of let it go. We want to get it to the point where we have most of the water out of the system. You can see that we're getting close. I'm going to let the pressure build up in the line a little bit, and then we'll do this again. So you're seeing now we're getting really close to being to the point where there's still some liquids that are coming out, but mostly it's starting to be air. And this is kind of where we want to be. All right, so I'll let some air build up, and now we'll move over to the shower. Okay, I'm holding the shower head, and so I can kind of direct this a little bit. And then we'll do exactly the same thing. We'll just open up the water line. Oops, I just realized I have my shutoff valve on. So open up this water line, and then we'll just let some water out. You can see that there's nowhere near as much water in the line now because we've cleared out most of the water that's going to the back of the rig. So now let's do the hot side. You can see there's still quite a bit of water in those lines. So I'll stop it for a second. I'll let the pressure build back up into the line. And then we'll do this again. Okay, so we're mostly, just air at this point. Let's go over to the other. So now it's mostly just air. So we know that we're pretty good now with the back shower, so we'll just move on to the rest of the system. So just like in the bathrooms, I'm now at the front sink, so I'm going to move this to the hot side, just to be different, and then go ahead and let the water run out of the system. You can see there's nowhere near as much now because we've drained a lot of it all the way to the back of the rig. So let's just go ahead and open it up. Then close it. I let the compressor build up some pressure. And we'll open it up again. And now we're getting mostly air. So now let's turn to the cold side. And do exactly the same thing. And so what we're doing is we're pushing all of this water that's in the system out. Okay, now we're in the master bathroom. Do exactly the same thing. Hot water. Looks like we're getting nothing but air. Let the pressure build up for a second. Now we'll go over to the cold water side. And nothing. So we're doing pretty good up here. Looks like we've captured most of the water out of the line. So now let's look at the shower. Okay, like before, I'm holding the shower head so it doesn't go crazy. Let's just let a little bit of hot water. Oops, did it again. Had to open up our shutoff valve. So let's just go ahead and let some water out of the system. Okay, so now we're getting to air. So let's just go ahead and stop it for a second. And we'll let it pressure build up and see how we're doing. Okay, stop it for a second. See how we're doing. Now let's do the other line. This is the cold water side. Same kind of setup. We're just letting the water run out into the tub till we get the air. Okay, it's starting to pulse, so we'll just shut it down again. This will let the pressure build back up in the line from the air compressor. And we'll open it up again. And we just want to try to get as much air as possible and not, and not water. It's impossible to get all of the water out of the system, but it gets a vast majority of it out. So we have a good starting place. All right, so it looks like we're good there. We've got hot. That looks good. Got cold, that looks good. All right, so we look good. Now let's move over to the toilet. Okay, so this is the master bathroom toilet. We'll do exactly the same thing. Just kind of open it up a little bit. Make sure that we're getting most of the water out. I'll let this set again. Build up some pressure, and then we'll... Okay, so there's still a little bit of residual water coming out, but mostly we're good to go. So I thought I would stop and take a look at the washer just for a second. We're not quite ready to do anything with the washer. Washers have a low water pressure sensor that's built in. So if we try to start this washer up now to fill any water in, some water will come in, but as soon as we get to air, it's going to shut off. And it'll cause problems priming it when we start putting in the antifreeze. So I'm just going to let this set now, and then we'll cover this in a little bit. So after all that, you're probably thinking, oh geez, okay, we must be done with draining. And we're not. Remember this little special tool I showed you earlier that I created? We have one more valve, or actually two more valves that we need to drain with water. So let's take a look at the first one. So on the door side of our coach, we also have this very convenient water line that we need to also drain. So with this tool, we want to make sure that the valve is in the closed position so we can kind of control the water that's coming out. And then we just go in and we just connect it in. So remember, I took this piece off of the hose that came with it, and I bought these pieces to connect to it. So instead of having to use a hose, I can just use this little guy. So let's see if I can get the nubs lined up. Okay, so now we're ready to go. So let me stand back here so I don't get blasted. And then let's just open up this valve. And you can see we're pushing all this water out. Okay, we're getting to air, so I'll go ahead and stop it. And then I'll just let it run for a little bit. And you do not want to forget this, because this is directly exposed to the outside, and it's very easy to forget that this valve exists. And if you leave water in this line, it will definitely freeze. So looks like we're mostly just getting air vapor. I'll just kind of stop it and let it go. You can kind of hear my compressor out there maybe running. We'll just let it build up pressure again. And then I'm just letting the air out. Okay, so that looks good. So now I can go ahead and shut that off. And then we'll move over to the last valve that we need to drain. So we're back into our Nautilus system. We also have this shower fitting out here that has hot and cold water. So just like on the other side, you want to make sure this valve, of course, is closed so you don't get a face full of water. And then you just put it in the system and, you know, kind of lock it in. Now, on this one, I can go ahead and open the hot water fully. And then I just need to stand back, try to get out of the way here. And then I just open up the valve, and we just want to make sure that we've evacuated the water as much as we can out of the system. Okay, now I've switched over, and now I've turned the hot water off and I've turned the cold water on. We'll do exactly the same thing. Just kind of let it go, trying not to get blasted with this water. So you can see at this point, we're mostly getting just air. So turn the hot water or the cold water off, turn the hot water on again. One more time. Okay, it looks like the system is almost done, so I can go ahead and take this valve off. Now, the next thing that we need to do is to blow out the low water lines. So we still haven't done these yet, so now we drained them, but we haven't actually pushed air out of them. So we want to do that as well. So we just open this up. You can see, look at all that water coming out. So that was still water that was in the system. So I'm letting the air kind of build back up, the air pressure. Then we'll do the hot side. Okay, so we're getting good airflow. I'll turn that guy off again. And you can kind of hear all this noise going on out here. What this is the pressure valve is just building back up again. And when it gets to its cutoff point, it'll stop. And then we would just go and kind of do it one or two more times. So now I'm mostly getting just air, so that's good. So we'll do this one. And I'm mostly getting air again, so that's good. Okay, one of the unique features of this Nautilus system is that these diverter valves can build up water in behind the units. So we want to blow that out as well. So the easiest way to do that is to go back down here to our pressure regulator, and let's turn off the water pressure for a second. And then you go and you just turn these to 45 degrees. And so what that's doing is that is kind of blending the valves. It's not all the way open, not all the way closed, and it just lets kind of lets water flow through both sides. So then now I just go back down here and I let my air come back in. And so what this is doing in behind the scenes, it won't stop because we don't have these in an actual, they're not set to stop, they're in between. It just blows air through the system, and we make sure that we have all of the water that's kind of in the lines behind this is kind of blown out as well. So now we'll put this back into winterize mode, which is white down, blue to the left, black to the right, green to the right, and red to the right. Now we're ready to move on to adding antifreeze. Okay, now that we have the water line, the siphon line connected into our antifreeze, all we have to do is come up here to this button right here and flip it on. And so what's happening, you might be able to hear it in the background. You can kind of sort of see it in the siphon hose. It's starting to fill the system up with antifreeze. And so all we need to do is just let this run for a little bit until the lines pressurize. Okay, we're back in the rear bathroom again. And so now that the pump has pressurized the line in the front, all we do is go pick one side, I'll pick cold, and then we just open it up. And as you can hear, the air is pushing out of the line. So what it's doing is the pump is just priming antifreeze into the system. So hopefully here in a minute, we'll see some antifreeze coming out up here. Okay, we're starting to see some water, and now we know that it's nice pink. So there we go, that's our antifreeze. So now that we've got it in the cold side, let's go ahead and move over to the hot side. And just like that, we just let it flow on in. We can see it's slowly coming in. We want to make sure that we've got a nice, good, steady flow, so we know everything's working correctly. All right, so now, get myself wet here. This is not a kind of job you want to do and not worry about making a little bit of a mess. So now we've got this guy going, and looks like it's pretty good, so we'll go ahead and stop that. Then we'll move over to the toilet, and we'll do exactly the same thing. You can see the antifreeze coming out. Just let it run a little bit. All right, looks good. Flush that. All right, so that looks good. So now let me go over here to the shower. I pulled the shower head off. Start with the, I'm just going to run it into the toilet. So we've got some water coming in now. And we can see it's kind of a pink color. Give it a second so we make sure that we get this fully in the line. So we dump that. And we can kind of see, it looks like, yes, we have got antifreeze in that line. So now let's go up here. I'll turn this off. I turned on the cold side now. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just dumping this down the toilet because it's a little bit easier to clean. Open up this valve a little bit more. Sorry, I'm moving the camera around. It's hard to do this. At the same time, I need like 3 or 4 hands. Okay, it looks like we've got nice pink coming out of here. So that's good. I'll go ahead and stomp that. Now, one of the things that we do need to make sure of, and we'll catch that in a little bit, is putting antifreeze down in the drain line. There are P-traps in these lines, but I'll do that at the end after we're done. We're on the cold side, so I'll just go ahead and open this up just gently. You see we've got almost immediate water, and it's that pink color. I just like running it through to make sure that we've got a nice even flow. Okay, that looks good. Now let me go ahead and move this over to the hot side. And I don't blast it open, I just open it a little bit so it doesn't overdrive the pump. And now it looks like we've got some nice flow here as well. So that's looking good. So now I'll go ahead and turn that off and we'll go to the master bathroom. And the master bathroom, let's go ahead and go to hot. See, we've got some nice good flow coming out, nice and pink, so we know that this is good. Still got a little bit of sputtering. We'll let that run through to stabilize. Then we'll go over and we'll move it to the cold side. And when it's foaming like that, that's still water in the line and air. So now we go ahead, and that looks good, so I can go ahead and turn that off. And then we'll just move on over here where we've got it. I'll get the shower. Go ahead and open that up. Now we've got some nice paint coming out. I'm going to make sure that it's nice and pink. We don't want to have any residual water in the line, so that's looking good. Now let's go to the other side, to the cold side. Here it coming. There she goes. And so I leave these on a nice trickle so that way the pump doesn't have to work so hard. So now it looks like we've got a nice flow of pink, so I can turn that off. I'll put this shower head back up. Now we'll go to the toilet. And we're getting some nice pink runoff into there. So that's looking good. All right. So now we're good there. So now let's go back outside. Okay, I have my special tool installed up here. This is directly below the washer. So we want to prime all these pump lines before we go to the washer so we know everything is pressurized. So let's go ahead and knock this one out next. Get this turned on, try to stay out of the way. And then we'll just let this run a little bit. Make sure that we get, we're starting to get that pink color. So we know we're getting close to having everything primed. You know, there's that little bit of foam. You can kind of see this, hard to see, but there's the pink color. So now we know that this guy is good. So let's go over to the other side. Okay, I've added 2 more gallons, so we've used not quite 5. There was probably about a gallon or so left in there, and I added 2 more. The nice thing about this bottle, another nice thing, is that anything that we don't use, we can just leave this in storage till next year, and it'll keep it clean. So I got my special tool again. This will be a little tricky. Let me turn on the hot side and try to get out of the way. And then we'll go ahead and we can see that luckily this one kind of goes a little bit faster. And we have this one nice and pink, so we can stop that and turn that side off. Go ahead and turn this side on. And then now we'll just go ahead and pump some fluid through there to make sure that we've got this one nice and clean as well. Okay, like what we did before, we need to turn these valves to 45 degrees. So I've turned the pump off, and let's just turn these guys to about 45 degrees. And so what these will do is that'll allow the fluid to circulate through all of the lines inside. So let me go ahead and turn this on. Now this will never stop in this condition because it's pumping it everywhere, basically. But we'll just go ahead and allow this to run for a second. And we'll turn it off. I want to close my tank here. This is the hot water tank. I don't want this going in there now. And I'll turn it on. I'll allow it to run just a little bit longer. And you can kind of see I don't have anything coming out of this line. But it will be running some into the holding tanks. So go ahead and turn that back off, and let's put everything back into winterization. So that goes this way, this goes this way, this way, this way, and this one goes down. Okay, so now we're back in winterization. Turn this on just one more time, just to make sure that the system pressurizes okay. And it looks like it has. The plump was a little loud, but now it's completely stopped. So we have the fluid in the system. So we're almost done. You probably thought we'd never get to this point. Now we are at the Splendide washer, and we need to winterize this. Okay, so the trick to this guy is that you first need to fill it with water. And the easiest way to do that is to go to quick wash, and we allow it to fill up with water, and then that'll siphon in the antifreeze into the system. Now, the Splendide document just says put it on warm, and that way it'll pull both hot and cold in at the same time. I like having a little more control over that, so I usually do this twice. So what we do first is I just do cold. Since it won't let me do hot, I'll just go to cold, and I'll close the door, and then we just press start. And so what we want to do is just to make sure that as the system is filling up, hopefully we can see in there, we can start seeing some water flowing in. And it's kind of got a little bit of a pink color to it. So this is just the cold side only. All right, so just kind of let that go. Now the system stopped. So what we want, so it's draining that out now. It's trying to get a feel for what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it. And now that I've stopped it, I'll just change a setting to something else that resets the system. And now let's go over and let's do, let me go to cycle number 1. That way I can go to hot only. And then we just start it again. And you know, we don't have to run the whole cycle. The whole idea is to make sure that we have hot water run into the system and cold water. So you can see it's starting to come in. Now this is hot only. You can see how it's kind of that pink color. So it's looking really good. So let me go ahead and stop it. Now I'm going to go, and what we want to do is we want to do spin only, and that is letter B. So we just do spin only letter B. And what that'll do is that's just a dry cycle, and that'll cause the pump to start pumping out all this water that's in it. So I just press start. You can kind of hear it maybe back here. So it's pumping that water out. So I just kind of listen until I know that I don't hear the water going anymore. And then let's just go ahead and stop it. We can go back to number 1 again, and this time let's go to cold only, and then we'll press start. And Now we want to go in here and we'll just watch her fill up again. So I like, this adds a couple more steps where the Splendide says just do, warm, and that would pull both warm and cold in at the same time. But the problem is you really can't control, which side is actually empty. Warm could have a little higher pressure on the cold side versus the warm side, and you could inadvertently have water in there. So you can see that that worked, and it put that in as cold. It drained it out. Okay, now we've turned back to the final just spin only cycle. That's number B. And then let's just go ahead and start this. And so what we want to do now is just to let it cycle. And so what it's going to do is it's going to spin like it's drying clothes only. And the pump runs, and it will evacuate all of the water that's left in the system. It's a self-priming pump, and it'll prime it out the line. So what we need to do is just let it go until we don't hear any more water draining out, and then the washer will be finally ready for winter. So we want to put some water in our antifreeze in our P-traps, and that way we know that there's a little trap underneath the sink drain. It's a little J trap, and it holds water. So we don't want those to freeze. So by making sure that there's antifreeze on both sides, that keeps those from freezing as well. Okay, now we're at the back, the front shower, and we just want to make sure that we've poured some antifreeze in there as well. Okay, so that's good. We'll catch the sink. All right, so we should be good to go now. Okay, the final things we need to do is start buttoning things up. So you can see I put that little cap in there that just kind of keeps critters and whatnot from going into our hot water heater. I've closed the pressure valve. I just go and I put this back on, if I can do this with one hand. All right, then we just go in and if I get it here, we lock the system back in place. Okay, I've also go up here and I make sure that the pump switch is in the off position. I disconnect my feed line hose and I put all that stuff away. I'm on the final flush with our black water tank, and then after I finish flushing that, I'll flush the rest of the tanks in the system, and we will be fully winterized.
Hanging on the beach, I asked if you left, could you take me?